Good afternoon or good morning to everyone on the line. Welcome to today's webinar presentation. My name is Maria Noesi and I will be your host and moderator this afternoon. We're really excited to have all of you join us today, given everything that's going on in the world. So we appreciate your time. Today's webinar is focused on our latest simulation, sexual misconduct prevention for students. As I look at the attendees on the line, I see quite a few of the Cognito current clients and some new friendly faces, so welcome. I hope that you find this presentation valuable and informative. Today, I am joined by two of my colleagues who have led the charge in the creation of this new simulation that it is now available for colleges and universities to implement with their students. However, before I hand it over to our presenters, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules. Today's presentation is being recorded, so do not worry about taking notes. We will send you a copy of both the recording and the slides after the presentation. Please don't worry about that. During the presentation, you are in listen-only mode. However, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a question box that you can utilize throughout the webinar to submit questions. We have allotted time at the end to go over as many as we can. Finally, for those of you that are on social media, please reach out to us there, connect with us on Twitter. You can also ask questions via Twitter using the Cognito Webinars hashtag. Finally, to just get us in the right frame of mind, I'd like to share with you two poll questions to just understand where all of you are joining us today. So on your screen, you're going to see the first poll question, which is, does your institution currently provide sexual misconduct prevention training to students? So if you can go ahead, come back to our screen and share your answers. The poll question again is, does your institution currently provide sexual misconduct prevention training to students? And again, some of that may be impacted by the current state in the landscape, whether that training was in person or virtual, but just give us a response of what it looked like in the past. I'm going to give everybody a couple more seconds to respond. And let's go ahead and share the results. So 90% of you said yes. So the majority of you currently have something in place in regards to sexual misconduct prevention training. Only 5% of you said no, and 5% of you are unsure. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the next poll. Thank you again for sharing and participating in that first one. The next poll is, so with 90% of you saying that you currently have something in place, can you now tell us how prepared would you say your students are to navigate difficult situations related to sexual misconduct? Would you say they're very prepared? There's no additional training needed? Somewhat prepared? We could all benefit from some additional practice or training, and not at all, not prepared at all. They have not received any training, which will only apply to that 5% or the 5% who are not sure. And I'm going to give you a few seconds to respond. Again, the question is, how prepared are your students to navigate difficult situations related to sexual misconduct? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this and share the results. Only 5 of you said very prepared, no additional training needed, which is, surprising to see given that how many of you have something in place, which is fair, which is good. 90% said somewhat, they could benefit from additional training. 0% said not prepared at all, and 5% said not sure. Again, thank you for responding and participating. I guess this will put us in a frame of mind to hear from our presenters about this new simulation. So with that, I'd like to introduce our 2 panelists. I am joined by Kim Weiland, who is the product manager at Cognito. She supports our educational vertical and has previously served as a senior client experience executive. Kim has had a diverse career across education, business, and nonprofits, with a focus on helping communities build capacity to tackle challenges and seize opportunities at the local level. Prior to joining Cognito, Kim served as the executive director for the Industrial Supply Association, which represents one of the largest manufacturing and distribution channels. I am also joined by Brian Fluman, who is a product owner for Cognito. Brian brings 20 years of product management and education technology to the Cognito team. As a product owner, he bridges the gap between market needs and content and technical development, working closely with internal and external stakeholders. Prior to joining Cognito, Brian worked for McGraw-Hill, Scholastic, and other edtech companies. Thank you both for joining us today, and I will now hand it over for you for this presentation.
Thank you, Maria. Want to just give a small caveat as we start. I'm sure many are in the same situation as we all are. Brian and I are working at home with our families and children, and I was joking with the team earlier that I accidentally photobombed my husband while he was giving a webinar yesterday. So we'll see how this goes today. But if you hear anything in the background, that's probably my family. So let's go ahead and jump right in. And if you want to go to the next slide, Scott. Every time we have presentations about our products, I always begin with this slide because it's very important. Everything that we do is grounded in our mission with the idea that we want to combine both the science of learning and the art of conversation so that we can really help to measurably improve social, emotional, and physical health. And we do that by giving people the opportunity to practice their skills with virtual humans in a safe and supportive environment. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time today talking about how we've taken that core and embedded it within the simulation around sexual misconduct prevention. So if we want to go on to the next one. As many of you know, Maria said that there's quite a few current clients on. We have actually been creating trainings for the higher education market for a while, since 2011. Previously, we had focused on really supporting conversations around mental health and supporting diversity on campus. Over the years, we have heard from our clients and from the market and from others asking us to potentially expand what we were covering. There are quite a few topics that they have asked us to cover, and really bring what we focus on and what we do, which is that ability to practice those skills, practice those conversations, and then really improve self-efficacy into some of these other topics. So throughout all of that, we wanted to make sure that all of the products that we were doing came back to this holistic idea that what we're doing is helping to improve school climate and school safety, and really helping to create a strong base for student success on campus. So what we did is we went and we just looked at some of the topics, and we decided that where we would begin and where we thought we could have a real strong impact was around the topic of sexual misconduct prevention. So Scott, if you want to go to the next slide. So we spent some time with SMEs and others, and we said, what if we could make sure that every student was able to gain the knowledge and skills to navigate these difficult situations around sexual misconduct in a safe and private practice environment, where we could really meet them where they are with the attitudes and behaviors that they're already bringing to campus, and be able to engage them in the learning and really give them feedback on where they are. If we did that, could we move the dial on self-efficacy and really empower students to improve their own school climate and increase the positive behaviors while decreasing negative behaviors at the same time? So as we began to figure out how we would do that within our learning model, we focused on several important learning objectives. And Brian Fuhrman's going to go through each of these learning objectives in more detail. But I just want to focus a little bit on a couple of them and really when we were spending time with our SMEs and our prevention experts, both internally and externally, our learning design experts, as well as our legal and compliance ones, what we were asking is, how do we use these virtual humans in this environment that we have to be able to more deeply engage our students in this? And so what we're focusing on doing is making sure that by giving them the ability to practice and conversations around these learning objectives, we're making sure that they're being able to use their reflective thinking skills, by making sure that they are able to decide what they're going to say next, what they're going to do next. We're making opportunities for them to use their critical thinking skills, deeply engage with this topic, and really have a better and deeper understanding and stronger self-efficacy. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and he's going to go into more details on each of these learning objectives and each of the modules within the simulation. And if you want to go to the next slide.
All right, thank you, Kim. Hi, everybody. I think we can move past my face. Thank you. So what I'm going to do first is kind of go over the full product, and then I will spend a little time on each of the modules, getting into a little bit more of the detail, and then we'll have an opportunity to demo a little bit of the product itself as well. So first of all, our product is separated into 5 different modules, starting with an overview, moving on to bystander intervention, kind of a pre-prevention part of the product, followed by what is consent. We were able to learn about giving and accepting consent, moving on to supporting the victim, which is kind of after an assault's happened, how do you deal with that? And then finally, staying safe. Before I go into each one, I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the things that are consistent across the whole product. So for one, you'll notice that each of the modules starts with what we call a didactic, which is essentially a short 5 to 7 minute interactive movie where the specific topic is introduced by coaches. Some other things that are throughout is the check for understanding. So each of the modules ends with a short 2 to 5 question quiz that I'll show you an example when we do the demo, but this is essentially to ensure that the students have really understood all of the material covered in that particular module. The 3 middle modules are kind of the meat of the product that really focus on these different centered around these different conversations. So each one of those has, in addition to the conversation itself, there is some feedback within the conversation while you're having it, but each one ends with what we refer to as a dashboard, which is kind of a summary of feedback from the full conversation. We also have an ideal path, which what that means is the way our conversations work is that you have a lot of different options to take as you go through each of the different scenarios. So some of them have good results, some of them have not as good results. So the ideal path gives every student the ability to quickly see what the conversation would look like if all of the best choices were taken. So let's move on to the first module. So in the introduction, you're introduced to your virtual coaches, in this case, Alex and Malcolm, who kind of walk you through the whole rest of the product. I should note that in addition to the coaches spending time with you, so to speak, while you're doing the training, they each have their own backstory as well. Alex had experienced an assault herself, and I feel like this kind of personalizes the story, and all of the users, the actual student users that we put this product in front of so far have really responded well to that relationship. So in addition to kind of introducing the product overall, the main focus of the introduction is to talk about some of the main definitions that they'll come across, whether it's the broader sexual misconduct or the specific sexual assault, stalking, etc. We also call out to our resources, where we allow individual schools to put their own definitions of the various behaviors, so we could, so the students will have the correct message from your school. We can move on. So the first conversation is the bystander intervention. So the coaches introduce that by explaining the 3 Ds of bystander intervention: delegate, distract, and direct. Now, I understand in some schools there's a 4th D, documenting, which we actually do cover in a later module. Some cases there's even a 5th D, delay, but for the most part, these 3 Ds are pretty universally understood as the appropriate tactics for bystander intervention. The conversation itself takes place at a party, and this is the conversation that I'm going to demo a little bit later. So I think we can move on to the next one. So checking for consent. So in this case, first the coaches come again and introduce you to what is important in consent, that it must be informed, enthusiastic, and continuous. In the conversation itself, you play the male character who is talking with his partner, who initially gives consent and then later on decides to take the consent away, and you have to kind of navigate that situation. Because this is a much more intense situation than some of the other scenarios that we have, in addition to the feedback that we provide throughout the conversation, we actually have what we refer to as dynamic feedback at the end of this conversation, where the female character, Kate, actually addresses you directly at the end, kind of telling you how she felt during the conversation, and allows you to kind of fully understand her perspective a little bit more than just the feedback from the coaches. I should also note that we do have at the very beginning of the simulation a kind of a warning that if you might be triggered by any of these topics, and we also refer you to the resources in that case. The third conversation, helping a friend. For those of you familiar with other Cognito products, this conversation is pretty similar to the way that we handle a lot of conversations in our other products, where you are playing someone talking to your friend and trying to help them with this situation. In this case, the female character had been assaulted, and you are talking with her. I want to make clear that you are definitely not required to be a counselor or to try to help her through. The main goal really is to show that you are respecting her and listening to her. And then the second part of this conversation is really about helping her understand resources available at the school and referring her to such resources. So in the introduction at the beginning, the 2 coaches spend time explaining the difference between confidential and non-confidential resources, both on and off campus. And again, we have call outs to resources where we will allow each school to list the specific resources available at their own schools as well. Finally, the last module, staying safe. This is just kind of a conclusion, the 2 coaches summarizing and also talking a little bit about just tips and tools on how to stay safe, as well as recognizing warning signs of abusive behavior. So now we're going to switch gears to the actual demo to let you guys see the product in action for a little bit. All right, so as I mentioned, this is the bystander conversation. So the setup here is that you're at your friend Abby's party. You see this character, Logan, acting what you believe is inappropriate with Sarah. Scott, did you give me the control? There we go. There are a few goals that you have to do, as you recall, mainly taking advantage of those 3 Ds. There's some background party noise that you might hear in the background.
Here, I got you another drink.
No thanks. I feel like I've had enough.
What? There's no such thing as enough.
I don't know.
You're gonna make me drink alone? Don't you want tonight to be fun for us?
Well, fine.
There we go.
You might be experiencing a little bit of a delay in the audio, but obviously when you are watching the demo itself, the lip sync is on track. So the way that all of our products work is you have a talk menu where you as the player are able to choose from a variety of options of things to say or do. So in this case, you can either intervene, I could ask for help, or I could decide to explore, check out the rest of the party. So I'm going to ask for help.
Hey, Abby.
Hey, Jason, what's up?
Can I talk to you for a minute?
Sure. What's going on?
So now the coaches are acknowledging that you selected to delegate. In addition to those coach feedback that come automatically after you make a selection on occasion, we also have feedback that might pop up at the bottom that you can choose to select if you want. So now I have some new options. I could get info, or I could explain my concern. I am going to pick this one.
I don't know. Should Sarah be flirting with Logan when she's that drunk?
Actually, Logan's the one coming on strong. That's not cool of him.
I just mean, I don't want her to put herself in a bad situation.
Whatever's going on over there, it's not Sarah's fault.
Oh, sorry.
So in this case, I did not pick the ideal voice, and it's telling me what I could have done better. So I'll make one more selection, and then we could move on.
I just feel like Logan is coming on a little strong to Sarah.
Really? Like how?
Just a second ago, he got her another drink. She said she'd had enough, and he kept pushing her till she took it.
Oh, man. Well, I know Logan from improv, but I don't really know Sarah. Do you?
Yeah, she's friends with my girlfriend, Tessa.
Regardless, it won't hurt to go over there. Let's not make assumptions, though. Let's just see where Sarah's at.
All right, so I'm going to stop the demo for now. Basically, what happens is the two characters approach the Logan, and they are able to distract, to separate them, and they have conversations with each one of them separately. But for the sake of time, I'm going to go back to our menu. So when students are first introduced to this product, this is the menu that they would come across first. Again, the way it works is that the first time they see it, only the initial introduction will be available, and then as they proceed through the product, each additional section becomes unlocked and they could use it. However, since we've already so for the sake of this demo, we've already gone through it. I'm going to show you what the feedback looks like for the helping a friend conversation. So again, remember that you can select a whole bunch of different options. So in this case, when the feedback appears, you'll see that I did not always select the right thing, and I'm given feedback specifically on those cases. So first, it gives me kind of an overall what I did, and then for each of the different tactics that you are using throughout the conversation, it also gives you feedback, and including quotes from things that you said, things that you might have said differently that would have helped you work better. And then so we have the similar thing for each of those three conversations. As I mentioned, you have the ability to view the ideal path It might take around 7 to 10 minutes to go through the conversation where you're choosing along the way. If you select the ideal path, it's only kind of a couple minutes of all the correct choices. And so the final thing I want to show you before we go back to the rest of the webinar is the check for understanding. So as I mentioned earlier on, at the end of every module, you come across a set of questions, kind of making sure that you understood what was going on. They're all the same format. They're all multiple choice. Just one thing of note is that you have to actually get to the correct answer if you want to move on. So all of the students that take part in this training will get to the correct answer for all of the different quiz questions. So this is what one of the questions looks like. It's totally based on things that you learned in that introductory movie. I'm going to say, this is my answer. Oh, I was wrong. So it gives me the feedback, tells me why I was wrong. I'll try this one. Still wrong. And then, oh, I guess it must be this one. Now, not only is it telling me why I selected the right answer, but it unlocks the ability to go to the next question. So that's essentially how the check for understanding works. And that is the end of the demo for now. So I'm going to pass it back on to Kim again.
Thanks, Brian. I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the evidence base. One of the things that we focus on and is very important to us is not only working with our prevention experts, our learning design experts, also our legal and other, is also to make sure that the student voice and our users and who will be engaging with this relate to the way the content is being put together, that it engages them in a way that they are not just clicking through, but really giving them the ability to practice. What we know, and as we build these, students are embedded in every part of our design all the way from the very beginning when we're developing the initial strategies all the way through. And what we know by doing that is that these user satisfactions are for some of our other products, but we know that by doing that and making sure that we're building these with the student voice included, is that they recommend this product, they feel that it engages them in a realistic way, and they enjoy this learning style. And so that's really important for us, especially when you're talking about dealing, when you're talking about creating a product for what can be a somewhat difficult and cynical group. I'm a former history teacher, so anytime I see numbers of this rate when you're talking about students in the ages of 17 into their early 20s, 90% are enjoying this this learning. That's a big deal, and that's where we make sure that we're really focusing. The other piece of it is the behavior change and the self-efficacy. That's why we build these products, because we want to give people the ability to really practice these skills. It's one thing to know the 3Ds. It's another thing to be able to practice the 3Ds. If you're not sure what to say in that moment, or you're hesitant because you're not sure how it will play out, having had the chance to go through it in a safe environment where you could make a mistake, you could have somebody react to you in a way that you might not expect, and you can sort of find your footing and what to do next. We know from the evidence base that having the ability to do that means that students are actually more empowered, more prepared, and more confident to actually act when the situation arises, and that's the ultimate goal. We do pre, post, and follow-up surveys to make sure that we can prove out that evidence base, but that's the key to use this product. So if you want to go to the next slide. So this is just a overview of the things that we talked about. I know I've I've mentioned this practice space a lot. Really, really important for engaging the students, for meeting them where they are, for giving them feedback based on their own attitudes and behaviors, really making sure that they feel confident and empowered and that they get to practice that in a safe space. And also, we really are covering a lot of different types of conversations and embedding that practice across several different types, but still making sure that they get to practice. The compliance piece is very important. We have made sure that we have included the content that is expected under the Clery Act and Title IX. Some of the questions that do come up are, what about state regulations? At this time, we can say yes, states do change things, but we are constantly making sure that we are checking in with our legal and making sure that we are staying on top of those compliance pieces. The impact measurement, I mentioned, we have pre-post and follow-up surveys. We also make sure that there are admin tools for you to track your usage and monitor your student uptake on these products. And I've sort of hammered home this point that it was developed with experts, but I also just want to point out that it wasn't a narrow group, it was a broad group that represented a very diverse example of the different audiences that are touched by this topic, which is really all of us, but there are certain ones that we wanted to make sure that their voice was well heard and represented in this, as well as a broad group of real students representing that voice as well. So if you want to go to the next slide. For those of you who are already clients of ours, this is a repeat, but we do have quite a few technical features. We also have the ability to implement, if that's needed, with a SSO or LMS integration. We have a great client success team. If you want to go to the next slide, I'll just talk briefly about them. Really, we have this team that is so great at making sure that they are working with the schools on their strategic plans, their rollout activities, making sure that we are supporting the universities and colleges on their goals for usage and their rollout plans. We also have the ability, if you're interested, to support you on a higher level with some enhanced implementation support by creating some customized rollout materials or other areas where we can step in, and that's really on a school-by-school basis based on conversations with you on your needs. And the last piece that I'll cover is, before we go to questions, is I'm sure there's questions on what the pricing is. On the next slide, there's actually a info@cognito.com where you can send in a request and get pricing. It is a tiered pricing based on your student population size. So at info@cognito.com, you can send in and get more pricing information, as well as more information on the product and a demo link as well. I'll turn it back over to Maria and open it up for questions.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Brian, for that awesome presentation. I do want to remind folks on the line to submit your questions. You can use the interface on the right-hand side of your screen, and I will keep an eye out for those questions. But to get started, Kim, I wanted to sort of talk about, with schools and students being remote or, transitioning to a remote environment, how would that change the implementation of Cognito, if at all, for the campus and also for students in terms of accessing a training like this?
Sure. So all of this is intended to be able to be for students to be able to do remotely. They are able to access this off of their mobile phones, their computers. They can it's really built so that it has full fidelity as a online learning piece. How it would be sent out to them and communicated to them is very similar to what a lot of universities are already doing. So whether that's through their current communication channels of email, if that is building it into their LMS and communicating it to students that way, if it's a page on their website that they push students to with all the login information, this is really ideal to do in that remote situation, because it does have the ability to have the high fidelity, doesn't need an in-person trainer. They can deliver this immediately.
Great, thank you. The next question is about the content in the simulation. There is a lot of tough topic covered here. How do you address students who may be triggered by the content in the simulation? What do you have embedded in the program to support them?
Sure. So we actually do make sure that there are trigger warnings. We do, as Brian mentioned, you are going to start the conversation with somebody telling their story, one of your coaches, and her experience. That's done to help really embed students into the topic and explore empathy. But because that's beginning that way, we do start and make sure that students know up front that there are resources available to them in the resources section that they can get into at any time. The goal there is that there would be both national resources as well as campus-specific resources that they could turn to. This is, content that can be very triggering for both those who have experienced it and those who have not, and we've made sure that that message is there and that they have linkage to supports right within, that they can access quickly right from within the simulation.
Great, and a couple of questions about resources, and you touched on it a little bit in your answer here, but can you expand how are schools able to customize those resources, and how are they made available to the student? Do they work with the client success team to get those resources updated? Can you just speak to that?
Sure, the resources piece is core to this product. There is a template that the CS team would work with and the university. It can either be embedded as PDFs in each of those sections, because we want to make sure that we have not only resources for reporting, but also that information such as Brian mentioned, school-specific definitions, school-specific reporting, school-specific sexual misconduct policies, all of those are built into the template so that we're making sure that they are all there. And the school would work with their CS team. That is built onto the dashboard, that resources piece, and students can access it at any time, but it also is referenced throughout the simulation and pushes there, and students cannot finish the simulation without going through that resources section. It's dynamic and can be updated at any time, and the CS team works directly with the schools to make sure that that is revisited on a regular basis and kept up to date.
Awesome. Kim, there's a question: how quickly can a school have this implemented on their campus?
That's dependent on the school. As far as setup goes, that's a very quick turnaround. Our typical time is about 2 weeks. The one thing that could extend that is if the school does not have their resources, if they don't know what they want to put in that resources section, because we do want to make sure that is filled out before it launches. The other pieces of a school wanted to do an SSO or LMS integration, we would scope that out with them, and that could extend the time as we just understand the scope of what they want to do there. But a typical is about 2 weeks.
I have a lot of folks that are asking if they will be able to access a simulation for themselves. The answer is yes. In the follow-up email with the recording and the slides, we will be sending you a link for you to experience a simulation at your own pace. The final question is, Kim, is that I have so far is on measuring the impact of the simulation. You talked a little bit about that when you presented the research that we currently have about Cognito, but how will schools be able to evaluate the program? What tools are in place for that?
Sure, that's a great question. So we have surveys that we have developed that would be a pre, post, and follow-up. They cover attitudinal types of questions that are predictors of behavior change. So we're asking questions around not only knowledge, but also their confidence and preparedness to use these skills. That's a real good predictor of behavior change by being able to prove out the self-efficacy. And so if anyone is interested and wants to understand what those surveys are and those questions are, we can cover those as part of any school who is sort of exploring this product, is to review those surveys as well.
Awesome. That about wraps it up with the questions that we've received. I want to thank all of you for joining this afternoon, and to Brian and Kim as well. As a reminder, if you have any additional questions about pricing or how to implement this on your campus, the info@Cognito email address is there on your screen for you. Please reach to us there. We will be sending you the slides and the recording after the webinar is completed, and a link to the simulation so you can experience it for yourself and also share with those in your campus who may want to look at it as well. Thank you again. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the next Cognito webinar. Thank you all.